Okay, we're going to get started now. I want to thank you all for joining us and welcome to today's presentation, which is about vaccinations, and I'll be running the slides today. My name is Mark Nanzer. I'm the Executive Director for the Retired Employees of San Diego County. And before I introduce our excellent presenter, Dr. Emily Doe, Chief Pharmacist at the County of San Diego, I'm going to just run through a few little logistical items to make sure we're all on the same page. Once again, thank you all for joining us, and we like to keep those of us not presenting, which is our audience, have your video off and your audio muted. We really appreciate that. It lessens any background noise and any confusion about who's presenting and so on. So during my introduction, I'm here with Andrew Steele, who is RESDC staff, and he's the behind the curtain person helping me with all technology aspects of the presentation. And one of the things I wanted to show you is, I'm going to share the screen first. As we go through the presentation, let's see. You may have questions for Dr. Doe. And as they come along, what we found works best is to have questions sent to the RESDC person. You'll see there's a little, this is what the screen looks like. May look a little different, but there's a chat button. If you click on that chat button, it'll show you a similar screen like this with a little drop down. You just send a message to, not to everyone, but to RESDC, and that'll be one of the options. Type that question in. I will grab that question and I will put it in a Word document. I'll look for questions that might be similar in nature and try to combine those. And then once Dr. Doe's presentation is completed, we'll have a little Q&A session of any questions that do arise. So thank you in advance for using that chat function, and that way Dr. Doe can do her presentation uninterrupted, excuse me. And then the other thing I want to show you is this. We're very excited to, if you're not aware, we have a RESDC YouTube channel, and right now you're looking at our website, www.resdc.net. All you do is you go to News and Events, RESDC YouTube. Click on that, and you'll find an array of great presentations that are available for viewing outside of this meeting. We record all these meetings so that we do have a recorded copy of it. Can I ask everybody to make sure they're muted? I do hear a little bit of background noise. I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. So basically, I encourage you to check out the RESDC YouTube page, because you'll see all the past presentations we've done over the last year, the virtual presentations. And then we also have great playlists. As you can see here, Health and Human Services at the county, National Institute on Retirement Security, My Senior Health Plan. So all presentations related to the work that we do at the Retired Employees of San Diego County. So I'm going to stop the share on that one. And now I'm really pleased to introduce Dr. Emily Doe. And I want to thank once again our partners at the County of San Diego for all of their support and collaboration on hosting and presenting the variety of events. Stay tuned to your network newsletter for other events we're going to be having throughout the rest of the year with our partners at the county, and also other virtual presentations that we share in partnership with San Diego County Credit Union and other partners as we go along, SD Sarah, so on. So Dr. Doe is currently the Chief Pharmacy Officer at the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency. Her responsibilities include coordinating in a matrix organization to provide healthcare services to a diverse population consisting of 3.3 million residents from different societal, cultural, and ethnic backgrounds, monitoring and identifying emerging trends in healthcare and pharmaceutical services to strategize, plan, and implement new programs. Prior to coming to HHSA, she was a pharmaceutical consultant specialist at the California Department of Public Health, Licensing and Certification. Today's presentation, How COVID-19 Vaccinations Can Help End the Current Pandemic, will address questions about the COVID-19 vaccine and how crucial it is in the fight against ending the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Doe, thank you once again for your presentation today. And I'm going to bring up your slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to you to begin the presentation.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I think since we started this COVID response, I'm sure you remember roughly a year ago, I just couldn't imagine this date, but less than 1 year later, we have a vaccine, and here we are talking about the vaccine. And you might have heard some exciting news coming out the CDC this morning about dropping the required mask when you are outdoor. So basically, it's going to trickle down from the CDC to the California Department of Public Health, and it will get to the county. So I think that's exciting news, and that's one more reason why we should get vaccinated. So today we'll talk about the important topics of why you should get vaccinated. A lot of you want to know how vaccine was developed, and also, the most important thing is how do you get the vaccine. So so pretty much, hopefully we lost a slide.
Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
I'm having some technical difficulties here, and then give me a second here.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just talk through some of the things while we're trying to get that up. So this presentation was last revised on 4/16, but as you know, we live in the time of COVID, so information is changing rapidly. So pretty much at the end of this conversation, things will change again. So I would just advise you to be aware of the changes in the current environment. So you can go to the next slide. And one more. There we go. So pretty much today's presentation will cover the background, why should you get vaccinated, and talking about vaccine development and safety. And then we'll talk about how do you prepare for your vaccination, and lastly, what to do after you're vaccinated. Next slide, please. All right, so there are some key terms or vocabularies we should keep in mind during this presentation. The term vaccine refers to the product that prepares your body to fight the disease faster and more effectively. So you're less likely to get sick if you're exposed to the disease-causing germs. Vaccination refers to the act of getting the vaccine itself, and usually it's an injection. We might have had some vaccines in the past that don't require an injection, but this COVID vaccine requires an injection. And then lastly, immunization, and this is important, and this is what we want to get, and that's the reason why we got the vaccine or received the vaccination. So essentially, immunization is the process of becoming immune or protected against the disease. And we'll talk a little bit about this, but for COVID vaccine, typically takes about 2 weeks after your last dose of the vaccine for you to be considered immunized. And you can get more information on the CDC website. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of myths around the vaccine, so let's talk about some of them. So myth number 1 is people often get sick with COVID. People who have gotten sick with COVID will not benefit from getting vaccinated. So currently, none of the vaccines developed in the US use the live virus. I'm sorry, I got the order backwards. So currently, the CDC advised that even though you had an infection in the past, you should still get the vaccine, because the immunity that you acquire from the infection might go away after about a short period of time. And currently, we are looking at about 90 days. So after you have gotten sick, typically you will want to eventually get the vaccine to benefit from full protection. So myth number 2, the COVID vaccine that received emergency use in the US will contain a live virus that causes the disease COVID-19. Currently, none of the vaccines approved or authorized in the United States use a live virus, so you cannot get an infection from getting the vaccine itself. And we will spend some time on how the vaccine was developed and what's in the vaccine. And the third myth is COVID vaccine gives you COVID-19. And again, That's similar to the myth that we talked about earlier. It does not contain the live virus, so you cannot get an infection. The next one is COVID vaccine caused you to test positive on the COVID-19 viral test. So the viral test is actually used to detect the presence of the virus that's causing the disease. And since you're not getting any part of the live virus, you cannot get an infection, and therefore you cannot test positive for the COVID-19. Next one is receiving a vaccine will alter your DNA. And I do hear this a lot, even among some of the healthcare professionals. So we'll talk about how the vaccine was developed, what's in the vaccine, but just know that the vaccine cannot change your DNA. And lastly, getting vaccinated will not help prevent you from getting sick from COVID-19. So the vaccine itself is not 100% effective against preventing illness from COVID-19, but the efficacy or the effectiveness is very high. It's about 95% for 2 of the vaccine and about 72% for 1 of the vaccines. So it's actually not 100%, but it's highly effective. So it will prevent most severe illnesses and hospitalization associated with COVID-19. So we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so now you want to know why should I get vaccinated? So let's go to the next slide. So vaccine works. So vaccine is just one of the tools that we use to prevent coronavirus. So you can wash your hands, you can stay 6 feet apart, you can cover your mouth with a mask, stay home when you're sick, and get tested when you are exposed to the virus. So vaccine is not the end all be all, but it's an important component of preventing or stopping the disease. Let's go to the next slide. So what you see here is every year we have millions of lives saved thanks to the vaccine, and there are different vaccines, and the most common vaccine that you see or receive every year is probably the flu vaccine. So comparing the flu vaccine to the coronavirus vaccine that we have, the flu vaccine in the last year was about 50% effective. And you can see that it does prevent deaths and severe illnesses and hospitalization. So right now, as of right now, the current vaccine is the most effective intervention we have, and that will help you from getting sick, keep you from getting sick from coronavirus, and also the safest way to help build protection for yourself and others. So typically there are 2 ways for you to acquire immunity. So that means after your immunization, you get the protection from the disease itself. So you can get immunity from becoming sick so that your body can fight an infection, and when you are exposed to the same virus again, your body knows how to fight it and fight it better. Or you can get the vaccine. So a lot of people did get sick, but we also find out that that immunity is decreased over time, so you still need to get the vaccine. All right, next slide. So now we're going to talk about vaccine development and safety. So what you see on the screen is pretty much the process of how do we have the vaccine we have today. So last year, the focus was on the clinical trial. So before the vaccine becomes available to the public, the drug manufacturer has to go through the clinical trial to test for safety. So first of all, they have to test to make sure it's safe to be used in human. And then they have to test for efficacy. So efficacy is how effective the vaccine is in the testing environment. And then effectiveness is how it's actually working in the real world. So what we're seeing is about 90% effectiveness for the vaccine in the real world with 2 of the vaccine that we'll talk about in a little bit. Also, they have safety monitoring boards to look at to oversee the study to make sure that the subjects or the people that volunteers to participate in the studies are safe. And then typically you have phase 3 of the clinical trial. So this is the largest study phase where they involve a lot of volunteers to make sure it's safe and effective. Make sure that the vaccine does what it's intended to do before it goes to the next stage. So currently, we have a process called emergency use authorization. So the emphasis is on the emergency use. So even though it is an emergency use, it does still have to meet the standards set by the Food and Drug Administration. And so it has to meet the safety and effectiveness standard, and it can only be made available in the US by either an approval. So that's the distinction between an approval and an emergency use. So the emergency use is typically more temporary, more urgent until they have enough data for full approval. So, and then after the emergency use authorization, or we call it EUA, the FDA and the CDC are collaborating and are monitoring for side effects or any adverse event related to the vaccine, or if there are any safety issue related to the vaccine. They will take additional actions, and we'll go to an example of what's happened with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and I believe you all might have heard about that too. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is pretty much a summary of how we get a vaccine. So typically, you would have the exploratory and preclinical trial. That has to happen and be completed before you move on to phase 1. And then after phase 1 is completed, you move on to phase 2, and so on. So each step on here is happened in sequence. So the next step doesn't happen until the previous step is completed. So what you're actually seeing here is the overlap of some of the steps. And in manufacturing, this is what the strategy that's used to reduce the time to market. So you can see the longest phase is actually phase 4, manufacturing and monitoring and quality control. So if you have seen or heard about Operation Warp Speed from last year, basically some of the steps are overlapping. So once they started the phase 1 clinical, they can start, shortly after that can start phase 2 and then phase 3. And the manufacturing itself typically would start after they have a lot of evidence to give them a good chance to get approved by the FDA before they start manufacturing a lot of vaccine. But in this case, they started manufacturing early on. So when the moment the vaccine got an EUA from the FDA, the vaccine pretty much come out to the public the next day or so. So that's how we were able to shorten the time needed to develop and produce a vaccine. So typically it'll take about 10 to 15 years. There's a lot of skeptical people out there questioning why the vaccine was developed so quickly, and this is the reason why it was developed and distributed quickly. All right, if we can go to the next slide. So this is how, as of 27th of February, we have 3 vaccines that receive an EUA. So the EUA is issued by the FDA to allow access to critical medical products that may help during a public health emergency. So an EUA is not an approval of the vaccine. So you can see the criteria for the EUA include the product has to be used for a serious life-threatening disease or condition. So I think we satisfy that with COVID. Based on the scientific evidence available, it's reasonable to believe that the product may be effective. So we've seen that as well. And the known or potential effects of the product outweigh the known or potential risks of the product. The benefits outweigh the risks essentially. And there is no adequate FDA-approved alternatives available. So pretty much all of those criteria were met. Next slide. Okay. So as of April 13, 2021, the 3rd vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, was paused because of some concern about blood clots in women between ages 18 and 48. And unfortunately, 1 woman expired and 1 was hospitalized in critical condition. So the pause happened on April 13, and as of last Friday, so this is an update, but there's also another update to the update. So last Friday, the FDA and actually the CDC Advisory Committee voted to lift the pause. So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is now back in circulation. So essentially, the committee met, reviewed the data, and decided that the risks outweigh, the benefits outweigh the risks, and therefore they wanted to lift the pause. So The update for everybody is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine now comes with an advisory that it can cause blood clots in the brain, abdomen, legs. Typically that happens between 1 to 2 weeks after the vaccination. And again, it's been female from ages 18 to 49. So basically patients should look for shortness of breath, chest pain, leg swelling, persistent abdominal pain, severe and persistent headache or blurred vision, and easily bruising or tiny blood spots under the skin that's away from the vaccination site. So those are some of the signs and symptoms to look for. So if the patient gets the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and they develop any of those symptoms within 1 to 2 weeks, they should contact the healthcare provider immediately or go to the hospital and inform the care provider that they got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine so that the appropriate treatment can be provided. So there's a note there. If you received the vaccine more than 3 weeks ago, the risk of having a blood clot is very low at this time. And mostly, all of these cases are in women between ages 18 and 48. All right, so next slide. All right, so we have 2 types of vaccine available. There are 3 vaccines, but 2 types of vaccine. So the first type of vaccine is called a messenger RNA or mRNA vaccine. And as you can see on the screen, we have 2 vaccines, and I'm pretty sure everyone's heard about them. It's the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine. So they are very similar. So they have an active ingredient, which is the messenger RNA, which carries the information to your body and tells your body to make the antibody. And then you have a lipid or a fatty molecule that helps to protect the RNA itself, because the mRNA or the messenger RNA is very fragile, so you need a vehicle to protect it. And then you also have some buffer to stabilize the pH, to match the pH in our body. And the reason is, usually if the pH doesn't match the pH in your body, it's gonna cause you're gonna feel the burn when you get the injection. And with the buffers, it helps to match your body. So therefore, it's not as painful when you get the vaccine. There's still the needle that you have to receive, but it doesn't burn. And then lastly, you have a protectant. So that's to protect everything from temperatures, fluctuation, and storage, and so on. So that's pretty much probably more than what you want to know about the vaccine, but I just wanted to make sure we share this so you know what's in the vaccine and you feel comfortable with the vaccine itself. Next slide, please. All right, so the other group of vaccine is the Janssen vaccine or the Johnson & Johnson. We did talk about this a little bit, and the other vaccine you might have heard about, which does not have an EUA in the US, is the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is also in the same class as a Janssen vaccine. It is a viral vector vaccine. So essentially you have a harmless virus that's been modified to carry the DNA generic code of the coronavirus spike protein. And that triggers your body to respond as if you had an infection, but you actually don't have an infection. So that's the active ingredients, and the delivery is a little bit different in terms of, the other one is a messenger RNA. This is a genetic or DNA material. So they use alcohol to improve the shelf life of the product. And they also use sugar in here, similar to the previous vaccine. And they have an emulsifier to help stabilize and hold the vaccine ingredients together. So the Janssen vaccine doesn't have the stringent storage requirements that the other 2 vaccines have. And then you also have a buffer just so that it doesn't cause a lot of pain when you get the injection. And then you also have a lipid material. All right, so, okay, so how often do you get the vaccine? So I like this slide because you actually get a snapshot of everything that you need to know about the vaccine. So the Pfizer vaccine would require 2 shots, and so you get 1 shot, and then you get another shot in 21 days. The Moderna is 28 days, and the Janssen or the Johnson & Johnson is pretty much a 1 shot and done. And this is the preference for a lot of people because, if you don't like needle, this is probably the choice, so you don't have to go and get 2 injections, either 3 weeks or 4 weeks apart. And also, out of the 3 vaccines, only the Pfizer vaccine was authorized for somebody 16 and older. The other 2 vaccines are only for patients ages 18 and older. So if you have somebody in your family or friends that are between the ages of 16 to 18, they have to get the Pfizer vaccine. The other 2 were not authorized for them. So you can see the effectiveness. The Pfizer vaccine has about 95% overall effectiveness. The Moderna is about the same, 94%, and the Janssen itself has about 66% based on large clinical studies. So the important thing to note here is the Janssen vaccine has 86% effectiveness against severe COVID illnesses and hospitalization. So even though it's slightly less effective than the other 2 vaccines, it is considered highly effective if you compare this to the seasonal influenza vaccine. And again, the emphasis here also is the trials were done at different times. So therefore, they're not really what we call a head-to-head comparison. So you can't compare the Janssen to the Moderna to the Pfizer vaccine. So that's the message I wanted to share. All right, so next slide, please. So a little more on the Janssen vaccine. So it is a viral vector that we discussed earlier, about 66% effective globally with 72% overall effectiveness in the US. And it is consistent across race and ethnicity and age. So a lot of people actually prefer this. And I have some family members that said, I want to wait for the J&J vaccine because I just want a 1 shot and be done. So next slide. So this is a little more visual on how on the differences between the vaccines. So you can see the mRNA, how it's made, so basically they're both injections. So the messenger RNA takes a little piece of spike protein and they turn that into the mRNA, which is a messenger that's packaged, and then it will be injected into your body. And then the viral vaccine took a part of the coronavirus DNA and they turned that into the DNA, and they put it inside a harness virus, and then that's injected. And the viral vector vaccine is actually an older technology, and we've used that for a lot of vaccine. The mRNA technology is a little bit new, but it's not that new, and they have been working on this for years behind the scene. So potentially, the scientists see the potential of using mRNA for other vaccines and treatment in the medical field. Just FYI, in case you're curious. All right, next slide. So the most important thing now is about vaccine distribution, and this has evolved a little bit from the beginning. I think we started vaccine distribution in December, and it has gotten a lot easier now for everyone to get the vaccine. So in the beginning, there was a lot of discussion about the phase of the vaccine, who got the vaccine first, and so on. So typically, I think I mentioned the FDA provides the EUA after they review the information from the drug manufacturer. And then that information goes to the CDC. Oh, I think we need to go one more slide forward. Here we go. So it goes to the CDC. The CDC has an advisory committee on immunization practices, and this is not a new committee. This is the committee that reviews every single vaccine that we have in the US, and they make recommendations on how to use them. And then the CDC would then adopt the advisory committee's recommendation. Typically, sometimes they'll go against the advisory committee, but typically they follow the advisory committee. And then in California, we take that recommendation and we also may add our own recommendations to it. At the local county, we also have an advisory committee, which also take that recommendation and add some more recommendation based on the local needs, including the harm versus the benefit, promote justice, mitigate health equities, and promote transparency, and so on. So we can go to the next slide. As of right now, everyone who is 16 and older can get a vaccine. So there's not a whole lot of who gets the vaccine anymore. Now we're trying to get people to get the vaccine. So California is allocating vaccine as they become available to ensure equitable distribution based on federal and state guidelines. So pretty much you can find all this information on the county website, and there is a website there, and I think in a little bit we can show you how to get some of that information yourself on the county website. Next, please. Okay, so essentially everyone who's 16 and older who live or work in San Diego County may get a vaccine at any of the sites in San Diego County. And if you want to save that information, the website is on the slide, and then we can also send out the slides after this presentation if you want. And what I find helpful is if you are on social media, I would get on Twitter or something, because if vaccine appointments become available, we would try to get that out on Twitter so that you can get that information quickly and share that with your friends and family and make your appointments. Next slide. So how do you get your vaccine? Pretty much the same way you get every other vaccine. So you can get it from your healthcare provider, and it just depends on your healthcare provider. They will reach out to you and contact you and let you know how to make an appointment and when to get a vaccine. If you don't have a healthcare provider, call 211. You can also get them at health center and pharmacies. So I think in the introduction, if you caught it, I am a pharmacist, so we do work with a lot of pharmacies, and a lot of people told me they like getting their vaccine from the pharmacies because it's accessible and so on, and that's where they go for everything. So you can go to the pharmacy's website, and they usually will have instruction for you on how to make an appointment at their pharmacy, and some might have open or walk-up appointment. And then you can also go to the county vaccination site, which the website is on the slide for you. And then we also partner with hospitals, clinics, and others to provide vaccination. So check all those out. And you can find everything on the county website, coronavirus.sd.com/vaccine. Next slide. All right, so you want to know what to do before your vaccination appointment. So next slide. So pretty much we'll tell everyone is to relax and get a good night's sleep before your vaccination appointment. Expect that you might experience some minor side effects. So you might have some muscle soreness the next day or so. So I typically said, I'm right-handed, so I'll take my shot on the left shoulder. You might feel a little tired, and how tired you are just depends on your bodies. Some people feel fine, a little sleepy. Some people might be out work for a day or two. You might have a little fever. The important thing is do not take acetaminophen or it's Tylenol or ibuprofen, which is Motrin, or any other pain medication in anticipation of the side effect from the vaccine. So don't take it before your appointment. If you have to take these if you have to take these medications to manage the symptom after the vaccine, you can do that. But typically, just wait and see how you feel before you take the medication. Don't take them before your appointment. And again, right now, if you go to any appointment, they ask that you wear a mask and stay away from each other if possible, 6 feet apart. Next slide. Okay, so once you get to your vaccination appointment, you get a card that looks like the card in the photo. It has the name of the vaccine you receive, the date you receive it, where you receive it, and when your next appointment should be. And then you will be asked to stay on site for about 15 or 30 minutes of monitoring. Just depends on your risk of having a severe allergic reaction. We just want to make sure that you are safe before we send you home. You will get a reminder for your second dose, or you might have made a second dose appointment before you came to the vaccination appointment. And remember earlier we were talking about the CDC is monitoring for side effects and everything after the EUA. This is where I encourage everyone to register with VSafe. So at the vaccination site, if anyone, usually you have a smartphone and there's a QR code that you can just point your camera to, and it'll take you to the VSafe registration. So typically what happened is the CDC would actually send you a text pretty much every day to check on you and see how you're doing. They'll remind you to make an appointment for your second dose and so on. So basically the CDC is collecting data to continuously monitor the vaccine's safety. And then if things come up, for example, like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, they received reports of bleeding. So therefore, they paused the vaccine for a little bit to evaluate the reports and make sure it's safe for the public before we can resume vaccination. So that's my plug for the V-Safe. It's pretty easy. It takes about, a minute or so every day. They'll text you and ask you how you're doing. Depends on how you answer. You might get additional question or not. If you said you're fine perfectly, then pretty much that's all they need to hear from you. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of these are often expected. You might have some pain and redness and swelling where you received the injection, and for some people it might be a little bit difficult to lift your arm for a day or two. So I would avoid, weightlifting and all the day after, because I don't think you might feel sore in the arm. You might have, chills, fevers, headache, muscle pain, nausea, and tiredness. Some people feel, they describe it as sleepiness, but it's tiredness. So pretty much if you have sore or swelling, you can apply cold or wet washcloth over the area just to cool it down. And use or exercise your arm, move it, but pretty much, avoid weightlifting. And make sure you drink plenty of fluid. I think people forget to drink fluid. That helps a lot. And you always feel better when you drink plenty of fluid. And rest lightly and call your doctor if your redness or tenderness where you got the shot increases after 24 hours, so typically 24 hours, and then it goes away or gets better. But if it gets worse, call your doctor. So this is very general advice. If you don't feel better, call your doctor. Or if you worry about any of your side effects, or if they don't seem to go away after a few days. And then earlier I talked a little bit about the blood clots with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Even though it's very small, very rare, if you have any of those symptoms, make sure you call your doctor right away. Next slide. Okay, so pretty much what we'll worry about most of the time is the anaphylactic reaction, which is a severe immediate allergic reaction within 4 hours or so. It doesn't happen to everyone, but it happens in rare circumstances. So you just have to be aware. If you have any allergies to any of these ingredients, PEG or any of the ingredients in the vaccine, just let the person giving you the vaccine know. They might not give you a vaccine. They might recommend a different vaccine. So just keep that in mind. If you are allergic to other types of vaccine, even if it was not severe, ask your doctor first to make sure that you're okay. And then if you have allergies not related to the vaccine, so, you have other allergies, seasonal allergies and all that, probably okay. But just make sure you disclose the information to the person giving you the vaccine so they can help you make the right decision. Next slide. All right, so pretty much if you have any of these symptoms, make sure you report to your doctor immediately. And typically people who have severe allergic reaction know, and they usually have an EpiPen with them. And that's why we ask you to remain on site for at least 15 or 30 minutes for observation, or call 911 and pretty much get help immediately or seek care immediately. Next. Okay, so I think we talked about the vaccines and how often you should get them. So the Pfizer is 21 days, the Moderna is 28 days apart. So, and the CDC recommend that you get your second dose no more than 6 weeks from the first dose. So that's 42 days maximum from your first dose. So continue to wash your hands and do everything that you were doing before vaccination. Continue to wear a mask and so on. And you are not considered fully immunized until 2 weeks after your last dose. So just continue to take the same precautions. Next. All right, so I think we've seen masks and how to use it correctly and how not to wear a mask. So just make sure that you follow all those precautions next. Okay, so again, don't combine 2 disposable masks, and you have a KN95, don't combine that with any other mask because it's really not effective when you alter the shield of the mask. And again, some of the things that are on the screen, for example, one layer, and don't use things that are materials that are hard to breathe because you might have problem with the breathing. And the valves will actually allow the virus to escape. So that's really not helpful when you're trying to prevent the source from spreading to other people. Next slide. Okay, so what can you do, or what to do after you're fully vaccinated? Okay, so I think, there are some of the guidelines from the CDC as to what you can do. And I think this helps to understand so that you can decide whether you want the vaccine or not. So currently it says you can gather indoor with other fully vaccinated people without wearing masks. So if you don't like masks, this is probably one way to not wear masks anymore when you gather with other people indoor. It's usually limited to a small group of people. And so you can gather indoor with unvaccinated people from one household at low risk, and you can travel in the US without a pre or post travel or test or quarantine. You do not need to stay away from others or get tested unless you have symptoms. And then this morning, the CDC just said that if you are fully immunized, so that means 2 weeks after your last dose of the vaccine, you can actually be outdoor at the beach, go hiking, and do other outdoor activities by yourself or with your family members, and so on, without a mask. So hopefully that guidelines from the CDC will come down to the state, and from the state will come down to the county. So I would expect to see the guidance for San Diego County to be updated soon. Next slide. Okay, so what should you keep doing in the meantime? So pretty much everything we have been doing: wash your hands, stay 6 feet, and wear a mask, and stay home if you're sick, of course. All right, so a couple reminders. Next slide. So as you've seen, we have a lot of strategies to prevent you from getting sick. And so hand washing, sanitizer, avoid touching your face, and everything that we have been doing, none of them are effective alone, but when we combine them, they're highly effective. And the last layer that protects you is vaccination. So again, if you are familiar with the Swiss cheese model, every layer has holes, but you only get the infection when all the holes line up. So the vaccination is the last step or the last barrier, and it's not perfect, as we discussed. It's not 100% effective. It's about 72 to 95% effective. But if we combine that with everything that we have been doing, we can prevent the infection. And let's see, go to the next slide. Okay, so we do all that because virus continuously evolve or mutate. So you've heard about a lot of the variants, right? You got the California variants. I mean, there is a number there that refers to the variants, and it's typically difficult for people to remember. So I'm just gonna read for the sake of this. There's like 2 California variants, one from the UK, one from South Africa, and one from Brazil. So if we have enough people vaccinated, and if we have masks and everything in place, the virus cannot spread. And if they cannot spread, they cannot mutate. So that's the whole point of vaccination, and try to get the infection rate down. Next, please. All right, so everything that you have been doing in your community and so on, just continue to do that. Get tested if you are sick. Even if you get the vaccine, I think we mentioned this, you still can get sick. So if you show any symptoms, make sure you get tested and treated. Next, please. All right, so how can you get involved and help? So there's a website for the vaccine where you can learn about how to make a vaccine appointment, how do you, all the information and everything that you need to know about the vaccine, and also information that you can use to educate your friends and family, or help provide the facts to your friends and family, and then provide the presentation. So you don't have to do this yourself. You can actually invite one of us to come and talk to your group, just like we have today. So that's, let's see what's on the next slide. And then these are some of the information or resources that you might find useful. So you have the CDC on vaccine, information on VSafe that I mentioned earlier. And then there's a website for all the fact sheet for all the vaccines. So if you want to learn about all the 3 vaccines before you decide which vaccine you want to receive, it's all on there. And then you can also look at Operation Warp Speed. It gives you a little more detailed explanation on Operation Warp Speed and how we got the vaccine so quickly. And then the state has a website. County, locally, we have about 3 websites, whatever is easier for you. It typically will take you to the same place. All right, next slide. So pretty much if you want more information for a specific sector, you can actually click on one of the links on the county website and it will give you more information. Next. All right, so there you go. I think that's the end of the presentation. If you'd like to provide feedback about this presentation or other information that you'd like to learn about the virus or the vaccine, let us know. And next slide. And I think so pretty much this is the end of it, but thank you for having me here today, and thank you for doing your part in wearing a mask and wash your hands and get your vaccine. And together we can make sure that we're out of this soon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Doe. And before, we only have one question that's been submitted, but before I get to that question, I think it's important to show you our attendees. I'm gonna just give me a second here to get back to a website. The wealth of information that you referred to and how to access it, how to access the presentation. So I'm gonna share. And for our folks that are on this Zoom presentation, if you go to the, one easy way to get to the county's website is if you go to the RESDC website, which is just www.resdec.net, right splashed across our front page is coronavirus updates and a link to the San Diego County COVID-19 website. You click there, there's tabs along here that have different information related to these topics. You click on health professionals. Let's see, maybe Dr. Doe, can you point me again to the actual presentation? I think it's under
there you go. Community Toolbox.
Community Toolbox.
Yep.
And there it is, COVID-19 vaccine presentation. So this presentation is the one you just witnessed that Dr. Doe went through. And basically when you go to particular slides that have a link, let's see, let's find one that is near the end. So all of these are different web links that you can access directly from the PowerPoint presentation, one of which being the California State COVID-19 website, as you can see. So it's very user-friendly in terms of the amount of information that's at your fingertips and just a few clicks away. So we highly recommend you check those out. There are also, let's see. There are also just a variety of different information that you can gather. Even if you're a health professional, you can access information here in multiple languages. They have a variety of, that's information for busy clinicians, but overall, these are the different topics that you can access. Each one unfolds more information for you to access. The regular COVID-19 page that really goes over the dashboard that is reported on regularly at County Board of Supervisors and through televised updates, case rate locations, triggers dashboards, vaccination dashboard, and just a variety of data that is available to you. So once again, I highly encourage that. I'm going to stop that share. And then I'm going to ask the question that came up. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, so this question is related to after receiving both shots, in terms of when you are vaccinated with Pfizer, will you need to have Pfizer boosters, or can you mix manufacturers on boosters after you've had your first vaccination, both shots?
So is this a question about getting a booster after your series of 2 doses from Pfizer, or the question is about second dose?
Yes, after you've received both. And
okay,
we still are waiting what the boosters will look like.
Yeah, so currently we do not have any evidence or guidance regarding the needs for a booster. So last I've heard, all the vaccines itself are good for at least 6 months, so you are protected for at least 6 months. And interestingly, we talked about Operation Warp Speed and how we can get the vaccines out faster. We don't have a way to study to see how long the protection will last. So they are continuously monitoring and checking and seeing how long the protection or the immunity will last. So time will tell. Unfortunately, we don't have ways to predict, but currently there are a lot of talks about, you know, booster and which one to get. And I think we will have more information in the future. And yes, there are studies that study the mixture of, if you got the Pfizer vaccine, can you get a different vaccine for your booster? And right now it's too soon to tell. And of course, you know, we might have something later today, or we might have something or some updates, you know, later this month or next month or in the next few months. So we'll just have to continue to monitor and see. And the only thing we know now is we have the vaccine and it does protect us. So that's what I would focus on now. And I'm hoping that this would be a one time and be done, and I don't have to get it annually. But the good news is they are also looking at combining this with the seasonal influenza vaccine. So if there's a need for you to get this vaccine annually, let's just say, they might combine it in an influenza vaccine. Remember when we had the flu and then we had H1N1, they were able to combine that into one vaccine so that you don't have to get multiple shots. And so if we do need a booster, hopefully it'll be something, it'll be packaged in another vaccine so that you don't have to get multiple shots, but too soon to tell at the moment.
It's interesting how fast things change. I bet we as outsiders recognize that, but you as somebody that works on this every day, you see constantly information that evolves over time related to the virus and the vaccinations and so on. So so before we go, I just want to thank you once again, Dr. Doe. You did an outstanding job, and remind everybody to share this information with your friends, family, colleagues, that this presentation will be up on the RESDC YouTube page, which you can access at our website. Once again, it's www.resdec.net. And we encourage you to go there and watch it, and others can watch it at their leisure. And it's just great information for us to post. And with that, I'm going to wish everybody a great day. I'm going to thank you once again, Dr. Doe, for your time and your presentation today. It's a lot of great information, I think, that is important information for all of us to educate ourselves about. So, and you did the great education today. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the presentation and tell everybody to have a great day. Thanks, everybody.